Hey everyone, welcome back to Pushing Film. Today I'm going to talk about my first experience shooting on large format. I borrowed this large format 4x5 camera from a friend, and it's an MPP camera, which is a British brand of micro technical camera, which is what this one's called. It's a type of view camera, or sometimes referred to as a press camera, which is on the smaller side of 4x5 cameras. It was designed to be portable and it folds up to a fairly small size. It is made of a metal construction, so it is actually pretty heavy in the hand, but it just opens up on the front door like this. And the front lens standard pulls out and it has a bellows. So I won't go too much into the technical details of the camera or large format cameras in general. I just want to talk about my experience getting into large format, shooting this format for the first time, how I found it, and because I'd always been curious about large format and kind of messed around with it on friends' cameras, I was really glad to be able to borrow this 4x5 camera from my friend Nathan, so thanks for that, Nathan. I've had it for quite a while now. He let me borrow it while he was overseas in exchange for helping him move house, and even threw in some film for me to try. So let's just jump into some of the times I took the camera out and tried to use it, those very first few times. The first thing I wanted to do was familiarize myself with shooting large format. So I took the camera just outside and took this shot on Kodak Ektar 100, and it's nothing really too special. It just helped me get familiar with the camera, take my very first shot, get it processed, make sure I was doing everything correctly. After that, I took the camera with me to my local coastline and took this shot on Kodak T-Max 400 black and white film. Now when I zoom into this, you can really see what the main benefit of shooting on a large negative like 4x5 is, and that's that you get all this extra detail. So the main potential of shooting on large format is that you can get a huge amount of detail, and therefore that means that you can print really big. Not only that, but you get the ability to play with movements on the front standard, similar to what you might be familiar with on a tilt shift lens, but on a large format you can do so much more and manipulate your plane of focus. So I wasn't quite ready to play with movements just yet, but I was keen to take some portraits on 4x5. That was something I was always fascinated with trying. So while I was in the same location, I used the chance to take a couple of portraits of my friend Ernest. I took this first shot on Kodak Ektar, and the following shot after this was taken on Kodak Tri-X 320. Now I don't actually particularly like the way I composed these shots. I think I kind of messed them up a little bit. I was still fairly new to it, and in hindsight, using 4x5 film, especially these two film stocks in a really busy scene like that with a lot of contrast, probably wasn't the best choice. But again, it was good practice to see how I could set up the shot, get someone to pose and get the shot in focus at the very least. And I still kind of don't mind how the black and white shot came out. I also took the camera with me on a short road trip, which was to go and scout a location for a potential wedding shoot. There were these really nice blossom trees in the area, so I took one of the shots of the trees on this Provia 4x5 shot, which I really quite like. The Provia sheets were the ones that Nathan had thrown in while letting me borrow the camera. They were actually very expired, but I just exposed it normally at 100, and I really do like how this shot came out. And following that, I took a portrait of Sarah on Kodak black and white film. Now this one I kind of messed up because I don't know what I did. I somehow messed something up with the dark slide at the back and let some light leaks in. It wasn't completely ruined, but I did have to crop it in a little bit to reduce some of those light leaks. And I don't mind how the shot came out. The light was really nice. Next up, I took the camera with me on another road trip, and now this one was with Robin, who you might know from the channel The Real Sir Robin. This was while he was visiting sometime last year. Now keep in mind, I've had this camera for a while, and it took me about, I'm not sure how many months to shoot the amount of shots that I did, but it is one of those things that you won't use too often. But going on that trip with Robin was a great chance to take it along. I wasn't sure if I would use it, but I ended up setting it up for this landscape shot of an abandoned house that he and I found out in the countryside. I also shot this one on Provia 100 slide film. I did have to stop it down a little bit because the light was getting pretty low, but because I was on a tripod, I could shoot at a lower shutter speed. And in this shot, I did play with the movements a little bit to try and make sure that the depth of field captured the whole house in focus. So I'm really happy with how that shot came out. That's probably one of the best ones I think I took with my time borrowing this camera. And it's also the shot that you see printed behind me over here. It's probably the only shot I printed out, and I was really glad that I was able to nail the exposure without using a spot meter, just by using a handheld meter, and luckily the light wasn't too high contrast. So that was probably the first what I would call successful shot that I managed to take on the large format camera. After that, I wanted to do a portrait of Robin while we were there and the light was really good. So I loaded up another film holder I had with some Tri-X320 on it, and I set the lens wide open, and that meant that he had to stay really still while I took this portrait. So luckily that shot came out all right. I think focus was almost perfect, not quite, but it was good enough when you're looking at the photo on a screen at the very least. And if you guys haven't seen the episode that I did about this little road trip with Robin, the country drive, do check it out. Following shooting at the abandoned house, we found a really cool location to shoot. It's a fun little video of our experience shooting out in the country. So for the following shots, and I'm rounding it all up here, I'm gonna show you some of this footage which I took out on location in the Mornington Peninsula here in Melbourne. Right, I'm down here by the coast and I found a beautiful spot here late in the afternoon to try and take some shots on the large format. I'm just about to set the camera up. One of the things I'm gonna try and do with this shot is use the front movement, the tilt on the front standard, and get the foreground and the background in focus. I'm gonna try and frame that nice pocket where I can start to see the coastline and the waves crashing down there, and also try and get this foreground in focus. So I'm gonna effectively tilt the plane of focus down along with the scene that I've got here. And with the 150mm lens, it's gonna be a pretty tight frame, but I'm shooting Ektar 100, so having that ability to tilt the front of the lens should help a lot. Let's get set up. So one of the tricky things is trying to get a good view of the ground glass. So I'm just using this old dark bag that I brought with me. And I think I have the composition pretty well lined up now. Obviously when you're looking in the back of a large format camera, everything's upside down, so I think we're good to go. Moment of truth. Alright, so I found another beautiful scene here, not far from sunset. And I'm going to try shooting some black and white this time. I have some Tri-X320 loaded here. And because there's a lot of contrast, I think the black and white will work a bit better, a little bit more dynamic range. But with the 4.5, I'm going to try again to try and get a nice plane of focus all the way from those distant cliff faces down there, and even try and get some of this grass in the foreground because it's got some great light on it right now. So I'm going to try and quickly compose this one, and hopefully you guys will have a good shot to see, or even if it's crap, I'll still show it. So I hope you enjoyed some of that footage of that mini location shoot, and I'm going to sum up the video now and just talk about what my takeaway from this experience shooting 4x5 was. So overall, the main thing is that it was a really big learning experience shooting on 4x5 for the first time. There is a lot more that you need to think about, and because the negative is so large, depth of field is really shallow for the equivalent numbers that we're used to on smaller formats. Not only that, but there's a lot more factors and steps in the process of actually making a photo, so there's a lot more that can go wrong. And this means that I did mess up a few shots, but all in all, it was a great learning experience. And even though I messed up those shots, I was actually pretty lucky in that I had Nathan not only let me borrow the camera, but in exchange for having helped him out with something, he even chucked in those extra sheets of film. And I know that generally it is a really expensive thing, so I was pretty lucky to at least have that. Not only that, but at the time I was still working at a camera store, so I still had the ability to get a staff discount on not only buying sheets of 4x5 film that I used for all these shots, but also getting them processed. And the other good thing is, at least with 4x5 film, it is fairly easy to scan it yourself if you have a flatbed scanner, because the negative is such a large size and there's not too much trouble getting it flat and scanning it. So on that note, all shots were scanned on my Epson V800 scanner. Most of them were with the Epson built-in software, except for some of those color negative shots that you saw. A lot of those I ended up rescanning but using Negative Lab Pro. And I found that the colors came out a lot better. So for most of the ones you've probably seen in this video, they were done with Negative Lab Pro. And I do plan to do another video on Negative Lab Pro, kind of an update, taking into account their latest version and some of the updates I've made to my process of home scanning and some of the things that I'll be doing going forward using that process. So overall, I do think it's really quite worth it if you've ever been curious about shooting 4x5. Now, I know it's not the most accessible thing for everyone, but I think if you have the patience And especially when you actually do nail a shot, it is quite rewarding. And then you have that ability to have a huge negative with so much detail and then print it really big. The shot that you see behind me here wasn't even printed near as big as it could have been, especially if you get a really high res scan like a FlexTight, or even if it's done on a flatbed, you can print it maybe up to 1 meter and probably go as big as you like. Not only that, but having access to large format, you can manipulate the depth of field with those movements that are on the front and sometimes on the back of the camera, and it's a lot more than you can do on something like a tilt shift lens. So even though I didn't take full advantage of that, I think it opens up a whole world of creative ability that you can't do on anything else but a larger format camera like this. So would I continue to shoot large format? Well, the answer is yes, I do really want to. Unfortunately, I have to give this camera back to Nathan very soon, but I think if I was ever to get into it sometime down the track, I wouldn't mind trying something that's a little bit lighter in weight than these heavy metal-bodied cameras, because I'm the type of person that would want to have it to be really portable. I wouldn't get a really heavy camera on rails. I do like the portability of those small field cameras, the View type ones like the Speed Graphic and so on. But even then, I wouldn't mind going a step further and getting a wooden body camera like the Intrepid system. So Intrepid is a company that I believe started on Kickstarter. They manufacture a really lightweight wooden camera that does have some of those movements that I talked about earlier, and it's a lot more affordable than some of the other cameras that are out on the market. I wouldn't mind having something I can put in a backpack and take on a hike, for example. So if I ever do get a chance to try the Intrepid camera or anything similar, I will be sure to do a video on that, maybe more of a review and get a little bit more technical. But this was more about sharing my experience with you guys, getting into large format, especially for anyone who's ever been curious about it. I do recommend it if you ever have the chance to borrow or rent one or even just try it out. It is really rewarding. And I'll sum the video up there and say thanks for watching this. Do subscribe if you want to get notified of future videos that I put out. The next one's going to be about Lomography's Lomochrome purple film that I'm sort of halfway through reviewing, and I'm going to put out plenty more film related videos, so hopefully I'll see you in one of those, and thanks for watching.